Alright, OBS versus StreamLabs OBS, which I am going to do my best to stop calling SLOBS from now on. This video has been requested so much, and I've honestly put it off quite a bit. At first I thought it was kind of silly to want. Like, to me, it was pretty self-explanatory, and so my answer initially to everyone was, just watch my first video on it or try it for yourself. The difference should be obvious, but since it was requested so much, I took some time, and I do think I have a good way of explaining things, and I had a chance to interview one of the devs behind OBS Studio and talk to some of the people behind StreamLabs OBS, and so I have a good explanation, some wording that I wouldn't have had before as far as the difference between how OBS works and how StreamLabs OBS works and why they're so different and what problems or benefits that may cause in the future. So buckle up, I think this is going to be a good one. So the easy question that everyone kept asking is one that I will address with the entirety of this video, which is, which one do I prefer and who should use which? And I really feel like this video will line that out. A couple easy questions. Can you record with StreamLabs OBS? Yes. In my video, if you look at the software, there's a record button down there. You click it. It's like asking how to upload to YouTube. There's an upload button. Just look for it. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. Yes, you can record locally with StreamLabs OBS, but it is missing some features. You do have the normal advanced output mode to customize most of the settings, but multi-track recording is a missing feature at the moment, and we'll touch on some more missing features in a moment. So you can record, but it's not necessarily complete per se. Can you use Restream, Mixer, etc., rather? Yes, but there is some limitations, as at the moment, you can only sign in with YouTube or Twitch into StreamLabs OBS, and then that is the platform that you're getting your built-in integrated widgets from. So if you're using Mixer or another platform, then there's not a whole lot of point other than the auto config, because you still have to manually configure all of your alerts and all of your overlays and things, which to me detracts from the point of using StreamLabs OBS in the first place. And you can use Restream. They do have that as the streaming services. They have all the normal streaming services listed despite whatever you sign into, but you can only use one platform's alerts and widgets and StreamLabs integrations at a time, so you're kind of stuck there. StreamLabs OBS does have quite a few missing features compared to OBS Studio, and I will expand why that is. There's actually really good reasoning in a minute, but it is missing studio mode. And for those of you who don't understand what studio mode is or why it's useful, I do have an entire video on that, which I will have linked in the video description, because I had a couple of people asking, they're like, what's the big deal about not having studio mode? I don't even know why you use it. I don't know what studio mode is. I do have an explanation if you want to know, but that is missing and may never be implemented. Multi-track audio recording is, for whatever reason, not functional right now. You can only choose a drop down of a single track. So you have multiple tracks you can assign things to, but you can still only record one track, which is useful if you want to mix audio sources differently for a streaming track and a recording track, like if you want to exclude a separate music channel or something, but you still can't actually record multiple tracks. Another annoying issue is that when you remux your files from StreamLabs OBS, they all go to FLV instead of MP4, no matter what you choose. Really weird annoyance. Hopefully they should fix that, but otherwise you can still just use normal, like instead of remuxing with StreamLabs OBS, just use normal OBS and remux in there. VST apparently does sort of work, but you have to put the VST plugins files in the OBS or StreamLabs OBS folder instead of just where they naturally go. Like, it doesn't look for the external locations for that stuff. It's a little tricky, and StreamLabs OBS installs to the app data folder for some reason, so it's a little annoying to find, but hey, that's fine. One other thing is not everyone, but a lot of people seem to think that recording audio or streaming audio at all was a missing feature in StreamLabs OBS, and it's not. If you don't have audio, double check all of your settings and input devices and stuff, of course, but it has been found that if you have a noise gate filter added to your microphone in normal OBS and you import that profile and scene collection to StreamLabs OBS, it just like stops working and you don't get any audio at all, so you need to go in and disable that noise gate filter. or reset it back up at least. I don't know which. One of the big questions that everyone keeps asking and wants to know the answer to, and is the hot topic since that's what they bragged about, is it really faster? And at some point soon, I still haven't done this, I wanted to do it in preparation of this video, but it's more complicated than that. At some point soon, I will be doing some sort of A/B testing on a lower end rig, so I have more significant results. Probably my Windows XP rig just running Windows 10 with an AMD 6300. At some point I will be doing testing to try to get some numbers for you, but the issue is it is very difficult to get quantitative data to say whether or not it is faster, because their claims about it being better performing and stuff are fairly theoretical and abstract as is, because the source, well, first of all, and I will expand on how they're different literally like very quickly after this, but the core encoder, the core functionality of OBS is at the heart of StreamLabs OBS. So the way it works mostly the same, like on the back end. The way the core recording and streaming works is mostly the same. They do have some special optimizations for X264 that you can enable to try to get a little bit better quality for lower bit rates and squeeze a tiny bit of performance out of it for specific games, but on the whole it's the same core encoding functionality. Where the supposed performance benefits come in is from having the integration of Twitch chat and the little history feature for Streamlabs and the native integration of overlays and things, so that you don't need your web browser with 50 tabs and 3 different windows pulled up at the same time. You can keep your web browser closed and have OBS up, and theoretically that helps, but the problem is the app itself still uses those resources. It may use a little bit less, but it still uses some, and my cat's yelling at me, and it uses more RAM than normal OBS would in the first place, and so some people have found that it uses more processing power for them than normal OBS would, and that makes sense. Vanilla comparison of Streamlabs OBS versus normal OBS, Streamlabs OBS, for all intents and purposes, should be using more resources than normal OBS. Streamlabs is heavier and more intense than normal OBS because they packed all this functionality in here, and it's basically a giant web browser. And so that's where it gets really confusing, and it's difficult to actually quantify, because the way that they are implying that the performance benefits come is true if you keep your web browser closed. But if you're like anyone ever, you're still probably going to have your web browser open to have other things to check on, to tweet out your stream, to just look at other stuff when you need to. Like, there's That being said, I have seen a lot of comments come through on the video, and a couple people on our Discord who said it is running better for them. Part of that is just the way they have optimized it in that way. Part of it is also the version of the auto config tool that they have in the onboard process as soon as you open the app. The way it automatically detects the best settings for you and all that stuff is pretty accurate, and so that alone can get a better grasp on what your streaming settings should be and be more optimized for your hardware, and that will make it perform better. And so that's really cool. Like, it can make it to where it can automatically set up a more optimized profile for you to use, which runs better on your machine, which is great, and that's fine, and that's the big thing I was praising it for in my original video. But the core software isn't inherently faster. Lots of questions about updates have come in as well. Is Studio Mode in yet? Are they going to add in plugin support, NDI support, Stream Deck support? What's the deal with them forking it? I'm going to talk about how that changes things. You know, are they adding the new audio meters and surround sound from OBS Studio? Short answer, no. The way, and I took a good couple hours to go through how this works, and I talked to, like I said, I talked to the OBS dev, I talked to some of the people behind StreamLabs OBS to figure out exactly the wording I should use. So StreamLabs OBS is what's called a fork of normal OBS Studio. They have taken the core software, because it's open source and available on an open source license, the core backend software, I believe is referred to as libOBS, they have taken that and used that for their own software, which means inherently their software goes in a different direction, period. Doesn't matter what normal OBS does over here, StreamLabs OBS is going this way. Not necessarily better or worse, but they are now two completely different pieces of software that just share the same core base of code. Now it's split over here and doing its own thing. It's like if you cut off half of a plant and plant it over here, this plant will keep growing regardless of what happens to this plant. They are no longer linked. So if you give some food dye to this plant and it grows purple petals, this one over here doesn't magically start having purple petals. Hope that makes some sense. So the way OBS works, it's a desktop app designed for desktop functionality. It uses the Qt front end, which is a basic window display framework. I don't have the exact words, but it's called Qt. It's used for a lot of Linux apps as well that I've used in the past. And that is what they use to create the front end, the user interface aspect that you see, the front-facing features, which includes things like studio mode, the way the settings menus look and how they work, the new audio meters that they've added, things like that. StreamLabs OBS uses Electron, which basically takes the Chromium web browser idea and wraps it around a piece of software, which is a different way of approaching things, which a lot of people hate Electron apps. This is how Discord works. Discord is an Electron app. It works basically the same as an app as it does on the website, and it is running Chrome, basically, to run Discord. If you hit F12 in Discord, you're going to be able to view page source, just like in Chrome. And so that is how it does things. And so anything that they do on the front end, they are completely custom coding themselves. Now, they've tried to take some of the newer UI elements and kind of hack it together in their own way, but it's not going to work the same. So that means that any of those front-end updates, like the audio meters that OBS Studio introduces, StreamLabs devs are just going to have to take the core idea and completely implement it in their own way. It's not OBS updates and you just got to wait for StreamLabs OBS to update. They are two separate things, and this is why there are missing features. This is why there are broken features. They are taking this approach to doing things and sacrificing whatever compatibility with normal OBS stuff. Again, could be good, could be bad, based on how you feel, but that is what it is. This is why some UI elements don't work, like the multi-track recording. There's no studio mode. The Remux thing doesn't work because they're still working through the beta kinks of getting that together. And this is why new features won't be implemented, because they will have to make those up from scratch. This is also why plugins don't inherently work at all, because plugins are designed for everything that normal OBS uses. The UI, the front end, all of that. And you can't just plop that in a completely different piece of software and expect that to work. VST plugins are a little different since they don't actually use that necessarily. Like they're made to be universally compatible with all audio software in the first place. And they're basically just a bunch of DLLs for the most part. So those can work a little different, but that is why so many things don't work. So in order for the NDI plugin to work, that would require the developer, Polakis, to develop a separate NDI plugin for StreamLabs OBS, or for StreamLabs to just develop NDI functionality themselves. In order for the Stream Deck to work, which is what a lot of people have asked about outside of normal hotkeys, Elgato is going to have to introduce within, I guess, the Stream Deck installer, a separate plugin installation specifically for StreamLabs OBS, which is fine. They just have to do that, and that means that any of that extra functionality you wanted isn't going to be there out of the box. It will be easier for the Stream Deck plugin, as an example, to be implemented since it's 100% back-end. All it does is control basically the hotkeys and the functionality on the back end, because it doesn't, like, there's no UI that you use for the Stream Deck plugin. It is purely just to make the Stream Deck work over here. You don't see anything on OBS. So that one will be a little bit easier to introduce, but things that require full front-end use and stuff, not going to be so easy. I hope this clears things up a little bit. I hope this makes this a little bit more clear as to why things don't work, because a lot of people think this is just like a different update onto OBS and why doesn't this or that work. It is completely different software at this point. Every aspect except for the core encoding capabilities, basically, and compositing, are going to work different, and so they have to do things completely differently. The question has been brought up a few times now that if I like StreamLabs OBS a lot, what is the point of sticking with normal OBS at this point? Shouldn't we all just abandon normal OBS for the power and glory of StreamLabs OBS? Well, no. Firstly, as we were just talking about, updated features, all of the new features that they're going to continue to develop and implement into OBS Studio, you're going to miss out on those, or at least it's going to be very delayed until you see StreamLabs implement their own implement their own implementation. Okay, whatever, until they do their own version of it. But also, OBS Studio gives you a lot more control and advanced features. So if you don't want that, totally fine. For me, I do a lot of, intense advanced recording stuff that is very difficult to set up in StreamLabs OBS, or, multi-track audio recording. Still need normal OBS. StreamLabs OBS does one thing really, really well, and that is for game streamers to stream to Twitch and use the StreamLabs integration. Its strongest feature is that onboarding process where it asks you, basically a series of questions of what you want, and then automatically configures everything for you, and it does a good job of automatically configuring things, which is pretty cool. And then they have all of those integrations of the browser widgets and things like that you don't have to configure yourself or really even figure out. You're just like, yo, I want that, put it here, and it does it, which is great. They even have that built-in library for templates and things like that you can just pull from, which is great. That's amazing for those people wanting to do that specific thing. Integration to YouTube is still a little bit and part of that is because YouTube's API for streaming stuff is still pretty messy. There's no direct integration support for Mixer or Beam or any of those other platforms. And the software itself doesn't really work very well at all. Like, half of the functionality is disabled if you don't link it to a Twitch or YouTube account. But that's the point of the software. So if you're not going to do that, there really is no point to using it. But it does do that one thing very, very well, and serving that audience is going to be their strong suit. And they can do this, and this is what I was talking to the OBS people about, is they can implement things specifically catered towards game streamers on Twitch or whatever platforms when they introduce that may sacrifice more advanced or universal stuff, but that make that experience really, really good that OBS cannot do, because OBS is supposed to be a neutral, all usable platform. And so if they introduce features that break other features, or, features for one audience that ruins the experience for other audiences, that they can't do that. Whereas StreamLabs OBS can. They say, we're the ultimate tool for Twitch game streamers, and then they cut out some features like people like me might want. That's fine. That is exactly who they are serving, and they're going to be able to do a better job of it. But they're going to, exclude some in another way. I had some basic questions for the StreamLabs OBS team as well, based on stuff you all had asked that I wanted to run through as well. I asked what the end goal or longer term version of StreamLabs OBS looks like. They want to be the simplest way to stream for Twitch, YouTube, Mixer, and so on, while still remaining free and open source. And I appreciate that they're aiming to do that. Their target user will still be new streamers and existing streamers by just making your life easier than your previous setup may have had. Currently the app's more catered towards Twitch game streamers. Are there plans to more directly support other platforms? They said absolutely. They are planning to support other platforms and have major upgrades coming for that within the next 2 to 4 weeks. It was easier to get started with Twitch since all of that functionality was kind of there, but they are definitely introducing things for Mixer and so on within a month or so. They wanted me to hold off doing tutorials until they have something more stable, and that's what I wanted to do because it would make more sense to cover it in a more finalized state, and they will have more stuff coming. So I will be producing a little mini master course, so to speak, for StreamLabs OBS. My phone just went off. But I want to wait until they have more of the core functionality that they want to see in the software established. I asked about why they chose OBS as the core, why didn't they just make a plugin for it, and basically, the years of optimizations and tweaks for this kind of purpose that went into OBS is what makes StreamLabs OBS possible. And while they could have developed plugins to do the native integrations of certain things, like certain individual features from the software, the entire software as a whole wouldn't be possible just with the plugin API. So they needed to fork their own version. And so that's why it's something a little different, which makes sense. It would still be cool to see them produce a StreamLabs plugin. Had they developed that parallel or developed that first? I think some people who are helping with plugins and stuff for OBS are hoping to introduce the sidebar chat feature into OBS, and someone wants to introduce the little where it pops up the little alignment lines for your sources on the canvas in OBS. Individual people want to contribute that, but it would have been cool for them to have done some sort of plugin first. But that would also kind of create competition for their own sales of their own products, so that would be unlikely in the first place. I realize it's a free product, but there's still an advantage to having people use the tool you developed versus an add-on for someone else's tool. And this was also a question received a whole lot, so I asked, if they plan on supporting Mac, Linux, etc. as well with the software, and they said in the end goal they do want to support all the different platforms, especially that OBS already supports, but they have a long, long list of optimizations, tweaks, and fixes and improvements they need to make for Windows before they tackle another system. So long term, Windows and Mac users can see the software, or Windows and Mac users, Linux and Mac users can see the software, but it's pretty far out right now, and it could be another year or so or more probably. This is coming from me, not from them. Like, don't plan on it anytime soon. Keep learning normal OBS. So that's it for me. StreamLabs versus OBS, or StreamLabs OBS versus normal OBS Studio, or just OBS Studio. I don't want people calling it like classic or old. That's not what, it's just OBS Studio. This is basically everything you need to know to understand the differences, understand why you don't see certain features, understand where they're going, understand my indigestion, excuse me. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it helpful. I'm EposVox, here to make tech easier and more fun with videos like this. Subscribe if you want to see more helpful content. Come check out my original overview of the features of StreamLabs OBS if you missed that, or my full OBS Studio Masterclass if you want to learn the original OBS Studio. And hit the like button if you enjoyed. Share it out with a friend. I've had a lot of people asking questions about this, so if you see someone asking about StreamLabs OBS, be sure to share this their way so that they can learn as well and enjoy the software and learn what they need to know. And otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.
This video is sponsored by viewers like you. Our videos would not be possible without the generosity of those of you who contribute to one of our fan funding options, be it DonorBox, Twitch subscriptions, direct contributions via PayPal, or Patreon. To join our inner circle and get behind-the-scenes looks at videos, go to eposvox.com/support to learn more, and join us on Discord at eposvox.com/discord. Thanks.